Hi folks, I'm Brenton Dickieson, and today's 10-minute book talk comes out of an area of weakness for me rather than an area of strength. I'm going to talk about a book that I never imagined I would be talking about, and it's Louisa May Alcott's Little Women. Right, this book right here, a good-sized book for us to have a chat about here in this new year. Well, I really came to this for a few reasons. One, there's a new movie, obviously, about called Little Women, and I'm curious to see it, and I wanted to know kind of what they did with it because of recent interpretations like the Anne with an E series and the way that some of our major films and books and television shows are being reinterpreted based on today's moment. I was kind of curious to see how that would happen. It's also, I was struck by the original film, like from 25 years ago or thereabouts. I don't know when exactly, I think when I was in high school. And I was struck by the performance of some of the characters, and it actually resonated with me in a way that I'll talk about here in a moment, even though I only saw the movie once. And also I don't really know much about American literature in the 19th century, and I was curious to see how Louisa May Alcott was reading people like Jane Austen and the Brontes, as well as maybe people like Charles Dickens, who's writing right at the same time that she's writing. But I also am very curious about the way that Ella Montgomery is taking up Louisa May Alcott's work, or if they're sharing the same resources. There really are some good comparisons between, say, Anne of Green Gables and Jo from Little Women, and the way that they work out their vocations as individual women within a culture that they want to kind of be part of, but also be a little different from, and how they want to be teachers and writers and mothers and wives in that context. So that was interesting to me. So for all these reasons, plus the thing that I just wanted a nice Christmas book, I picked up this book, and it took me quite a long time to read. It took me, from before Christmas right until the new year. And so I wanted to talk about that for a few minutes. Now, if you aren't familiar with the book, or you've just seen the film and you haven't read the book yet, I would encourage you to read this book. It's really a strong book in a lot of ways. I only have sort of two critiques that I will give at the end. It's a Civil War story, American Civil War story, set in New England, where a family, a well-educated, what was once a well-to-do family, the March family, are settled in New England, and father, who is sort of a pastor figure in the community, is off at war, working as a chaplain in the war, because the family has 4 daughters. No sons to send to war, only 4 daughters. And at first this starts off as a story for the women that are left behind during war, very much like Rilla of Ingleside by Louisa May Montgomery, written around 1919, 1920. And so this story covers 4 girls, who are essential. This is Amy, who's the youngest, Beth, who's the second youngest, Jo, who's the second oldest, or Josephine, and Meg, who is the oldest. And these are the strongest characters of the piece. I think everybody would say would be Jo and Amy, but Meg and Beth have their roles. Each of the 4 girls, these little women, have their own characteristics, their own personality, and the book takes place, I haven't tracked the timeline, over a decade or so in their lives, and then kind of extends out from that to imagine what the future would look like. From what I understand, Louisa May Alcott actually wrote this semi-autobiographically, struggling with her own sense of being a writer and being a woman, her own sense of kind of her developing feminism, strong sense of moral values, but also a sense of kind of betrayal about the fact that, her sisters, they grew up in this great literary home, this great kind of conversational home, and then her sisters grow up and get married and kind of leave her behind, because that's not what, at least one point in her life, she really wanted to be like. Each of the girls has a different characteristic. Amy starts off the book as flighty and always saying things and wishing that she could really be part of a wealthier class, really wanting to be well off, and very beautiful even as a young girl, so probably has a chance of being able to marry up in that world, whereas in her own family she regrets that they once were wealthy but no longer have any wealth. They somehow lost their wealth, and so that's her greatest challenge. Beth is kind-hearted, dove-like, very, very, not just in the sense of innocence, but in the sense of elegance, and she ends up being very sickly, and this is one of the darker and more poignant stories in her life. Jo is impetuous and boyish. She's very much a tomboy, though the gender play with her is really kind of a lot of fun, and she wants to reject a lot of what it means to be a girl, but she also takes up other parts of it as well. She's actually really more interested in doing well and being good than she is in doing that as a girl or as a woman. Sometimes those overlap, sometimes they contradict. But she carves out for herself a space as an early novelist, trying to figure out what it is to be the kind of writer she wants to be. Is she going to just sell books and stories for the sake of selling them, or does she want to write something different? That's one of her real challenges. The other challenge, the love challenge, comes a little bit later. And then Meg, the oldest girl, who works as sort of a second mom for the girls, and also is interested in kind of marriage in all the normal ways. Well, the girls are great. They have this literary club. They read John Bunyan together, Pilgrim's Progress. They put on plays and these sort of things. And it's not until Laurie, a boy from next door, who starts to invade their world, where things start to disrupt a little bit. Not in a terribly negative way. He's brought in as an adoptive brother, but it's never just brother. Laurie ultimately is in love with Jo. Jo's not sure about that, and then there's a love interest that develops from there. Well, I was actually surprised how much... I don't really remember much from the 1990s film, except the cast itself, which really kind of colored my imagination of the characters when reading this book, even though it was 25 years later, and I only saw the film once. And maybe I've seen clips on television since, but nothing I've paid attention to. It just didn't draw me in. For example, when it comes to Amy, young Amy, who's played, I remember the Kirsten Dunst character, who was quite young at the time, Kirsten Dunst was, but I imagine Amy is sort of a blonde in the book, even though she's a brunette in the book, because of that Kirsten Dunst character, and so that really struck me. The Claire Danes as Beth character is sickly, and I still remember her holding these children and the sense of kind of fear. We don't get the depth of and the stolid response quite that we do in that film as in the book. Oh, I'd have to watch it again. But it really kind of struck me. I'm not as much struck by Meg, or even I remember Laurie from the film. He was kind of a character that bothered me in the film. But I was really struck with Winona Rider's treatment of Jo, the young ambitious woman who wants to be the successful writer, who initially eschews any kind of sense of marriage, and yet there's still this challenge that she has when the people around her get married. Well, while there's death and there's war and there's poverty and there's the potential for riches and there's the challenges of morality, there's the challenges of growing up in such a kind of a gendered world where boys do this and girls do this. Those are all there in the book. And there's really only kind of two complaints I have. Jo is a marvelously drawn character. Amy is really a strongly drawn character. And Beth, I think, works out really well in the book. But I have two things that I struggled with. Number one was Meg. Oh my goodness, I did not like the Meg character. She's always bossy and lecturing people, and she's a terrible mother. Oh my goodness. Like, she will raise psychopaths. But fortunately, the second problem with the book is how moralistic the book is. Now, it's almost in the tradition of manners books. It's a even though Louisa May Alcott wasn't a Christian specifically. She was really writing in the Christian vein to get that morality across. It comes out a little strong at points, but it's not terribly bad. It's just something that makes me resist the book a little bit. Those are the two big weaknesses that I have carrying into this book. And I look forward to see kind of what the new film does. I'm pretty sure it'll be a strong feminist interpretation, and it is a feminist book, but it would be really interesting to read the two together, the new film and the old book, because part of the feminism of Louisa May Alcott's original vision was very much for women to do what women should do because men are like such and such and women are like such and such. I don't think we can accept those things now, so I'll be curious to see how that film goes. That's my little totally non-professional, totally amateurish vision of what it was to read, for me, the first time reading Louisa May Alcott's Little Women. This is Brenton Dickieson doing my 10-minute book talk. I hope that you will subscribe below, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Check me out on Twitter at BrentonDana or at my website, www.pilgriminNarnia.com.